Ava's point of view.
I don't know how long I sat there. The TV droned on, but I couldn't hear it anymore. My ears were ringing. My body was frozen, stuck in that 1 second of stillness when the world had cracked open and swallowed something I hadn't even realized had become familiar. Miss Sinclair, dead. She was just here. She was just smiling, just reassuring me, just walking past me in a rush, and now, dead. My hand moved on its own, reaching for my phone. The screen was still lit with the message I hadn't had the heart to check earlier. Colton, don't leave the house. I'll be there soon. I swallowed hard and set the phone back down before I did something stupid like call him and demand answers I wasn't ready to hear, or accuse him of... what exactly? Nothing about this made sense. Miss Sinclair hadn't seemed scared, only tense, rushed, like she was late for something important, and now she is gone. I pushed the covers off and stood, my legs wobbly beneath me. The silence in the villa had never felt so loud. My skin prickled as I crossed to the window, parting the thick curtains just enough to peek outside. The driveway was empty, just shadows and a few blinking lights from the gate security. I needed air. I needed something that didn't smell like expensive linen and fear. I made it halfway to the door before I stopped myself. "Don't leave the house," he'd said. And after the news, I wasn't sure I even wanted to. My belly still felt tender from the procedure, my emotions still too raw. So instead, I went back to the bed, sat on the edge, and held my head in my hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. The woman who had orchestrated the entire surrogacy process, who'd looked at me with something like admiration and protectiveness, was now just... gone. My phone buzzed again. "Molly. Hey, you okay? I just saw the news." I stared at the text for a long second before replying. "Me. I don't know." A knock at the villa door made me jump. I froze, heart hammering. The maid didn't call out a greeting this time. No welcome. No footsteps echoing on the marble. Just a knock. And I had no idea who or what was waiting on the other side. The second the knock echoed through the villa again, I jumped up, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. Instinctively, I rushed to the door of my room, locked it, and pressed my back against it. Silence stretched painfully thin for a few seconds, until another knock came. Sharper, more urgent. I inched toward the door and pressed my ear against it. Voices floated through, muffled but clear enough to catch. "Are you sure she's in there?" a woman's voice asked, tinged with frustration. Another voice, also a woman but softer, answered, "Yes, she's there. Maybe she's sleeping." The knock came again, louder this time, rattling the nerves in my spine. "Miss Ava, please open the door," the first woman called, her tone now almost pleading. "Mr. Colton sent me to take you." I stood frozen for a moment, heart pounding harder than before. After what had happened to Miss Sinclair, after the way this whole day had twisted into something ugly and strange, I couldn't trust anyone right now. Not blindly. I spun around and grabbed my phone from the bed, quickly typing out a message to Mr. Colton. "Me. Someone is at my door saying you sent them to take me. Is this true? Please confirm." I stared at the screen, willing it to light up with a reply. Nothing. Another minute passed. Still nothing. Panic started to creep up my spine. Outside, I heard the woman mutter something, then a jingling of keys. Were they going to try and open the door? Before they could, I hurried to the door and cracked it open just slightly. A woman in her late 50s stood there, her face crinkled in visible worry. She immediately placed a hand on her chest and let out a sigh of relief when she saw me. "You worried me, young woman," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Are you all right?" I nodded hesitantly, confused and wary. "You need to grab anything that's yours," she continued. "I'm taking you. Mr. Colton's orders." My stomach twisted. "Where exactly are you taking me?" I asked, my voice coming out more fearful than I intended. To Mr. Colton's house, she said gently. It's his order. I nodded slowly, still unsure. I just need a minute, I said quickly, before slipping back into the room and checking my phone again. Still no reply. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. I bit my lip hard until I tasted a metallic hint of blood. What choice do I have? I couldn't stay locked up in here like a prisoner. Throwing on my oversized jacket, I grabbed my small bag and followed the woman into the hallway. She didn't rush me, simply waited with patient eyes before motioning for me to follow her outside. A black car was parked outside the villa. The woman opened the back door for me and climbed in beside me before the driver pulled away. I settled into the seat stiffly, hugging my bag close to my chest. As the car drove through the darkening streets, I glanced back once, my gaze catching the silhouette of the villa fading into the night. A tightness gripped my chest as the image of Miss Sinclair flashed in my mind. I couldn't believe she was really gone. I hadn't known her long, but in those short days she had shown me nothing but kindness. She'd been a beautiful woman, with an even more beautiful heart. I blinked quickly against the burn in my eyes, swallowing the grief down deep into the pit of my stomach where no one could see it. The city blurred past outside the car window, neon lights flickering in the distance like restless stars. I pressed my forehead lightly to the glass, trying to ground myself, but all I felt was the hum of the engine and the heavy silence inside the car. The woman beside me, grey hair pinned neatly, posture straight as a ruler, sat with her hands folded in her lap. She didn't speak, not once, not to me, not to the driver. It was like she'd been instructed to deliver me and nothing more. I couldn't take it anymore. When did you last see him? I asked quietly, not even sure why I was whispering. Her eyes shifted to me, calm but unreadable. Not long ago. That was all she said. My fingers tightened around my bag. Is he okay? Her lips pressed into a thin line. You'll see soon. Not reassuring, not comforting, just vague. I looked away again, trying to control the unease swirling in my gut. The drive stretched on, winding farther away from the bustle of the city until we reached a set of iron gates. They opened smoothly as we approached, revealing a long, tree-lined driveway that led to a sprawling house bathed in soft, golden light. It wasn't ostentatious like some of the mansions we'd passed, but it exuded quiet wealth, strong, timeless, intimidating. The car stopped at the front steps. The driver got out first, followed by the woman. She opened my door, offering her hand like I was a child needing guidance. I ignored it and stepped out on my own. Inside, the house was warm, almost too warm. The faint scent of cedar and leather wrapped around me as I followed the woman through a series of hallways until we stopped at a set of double doors. She knocked once, brisk and firm. A deep voice from inside. Bring her in. My pulse jumped. I knew that voice. She opened the door and gestured for me to enter. I did, stepping into what looked like a private study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a crackling fire, and behind a massive desk, Colton Sinclair. He was on his feet already, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, his tie discarded on the desk. But it wasn't his usual polished appearance that struck me. It was his face. There was tension there, tightness in his jaw, a shadow in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Leave us, he said to the woman. She nodded once and slipped out, closing the door quietly behind her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He just looked at me, and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to see in that gaze. Relief? Guilt? Anger? Finally, I broke the silence. She's dead. My voice cracked on the last word. His eyes softened, barely, but his tone stayed even. I know. I flinched at the calmness of it. That's all you have to say? She was my sister, he said, quiet but firm. And she's gone. Don't mistake composure for indifference. I blinked, caught off guard by the steel in his voice. For a second, I didn't know what to say. "What happened to her?" I asked finally, my voice trembling. "Colton? Was it an accident, or—" He moved suddenly, stepping around the desk toward me. I instinctively backed up a step, heart pounding, but he stopped a few feet away, close enough for me to see the strain in his eyes. "It wasn't an accident," he said, low and certain, "and whoever did this made a mistake bringing you into it." My stomach turned cold. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his desk, pulled out a folder, and set it on the coffee table between us. "Sit." I hesitated but obeyed, perching on the edge of the couch. He sat opposite me, his elbows resting on his knees as he opened the folder. Inside were photos, grainy surveillance stills, timestamps in the corner. One showed Miss Sinclair entering a parking garage. Another showed two men in dark clothes following a few minutes later. The last one, my breath caught, was of a black car I'd seen before, parked outside my old apartment, Nathan's. I looked up sharply. "Why is his car?" "Because your ex isn't just a violent bastard," Colton said evenly. "He's connected to the people who wanted to ruin me. And now—" His gaze locked on mine, dark and unwavering. "He might have killed my sister." The room tilted slightly, my pulse roaring in my ears. I opened my mouth to deny it, to argue, but no words came out. Colton leaned closer, his voice dropping to something softer, more dangerous. "Which means, Ava, you're not leaving my sight, not until I find out who's behind this." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My chest felt tight, like the walls were closing in around me. Then he said it, quietly, like it was the simplest truth in the world. "And until you give my sister the child she wanted, you're my responsibility." Days blurred together. I lost track of how many sunrises I'd watched through the tall glass windows of Mr. Colton's house. At first I'd thought the view might be enough to distract me. The rolling hills in the distance, the endless manicured gardens, the soft morning light spilling over everything like liquid gold. It was beautiful, breathtaking even, but beauty gets dull when you have no one to share it with. I hadn't seen Mr. Colton since that night in his study. No texts, no calls, no brief glimpses of him passing through a hallway. Nothing. Just an occasional note relayed through the staff. "Mr. Sinclair sends his regards. Mr. Sinclair says to rest." It was polite, detached, empty. He had left me in this house like a fragile piece of porcelain that needed guarding. The nurse, Margaret, was kind enough, but she wasn't company. She was efficiently wrapped in a starched white uniform, appearing in my room every morning to take my blood pressure, ask how I was feeling, and remind me to take the vitamins and medication the doctors had prescribed after the procedure. "How's the tenderness today?" she asked this morning as she tightened the cuff around my arm. "Fine," I said, because that was what she wanted to hear. She gave me a small, practiced smile, noting the numbers on her tablet. "Good. Keep drinking plenty of water. I'll send someone up with breakfast shortly." And then she was gone again. That was how it always went. Short, professional check-ins. No warmth, no real conversation. She didn't linger to talk about anything beyond my vitals. She didn't ask how I was really feeling, about Miss Sinclair's death, about being trapped here, about the gnawing emptiness that followed me like a shadow. So I spent my days alone. Breakfast arrived on a silver tray, fruit arranged like artwork, pastries that smelled faintly of butter and sugar, eggs cooked to perfection. I ate some of it and left most of it untouched. Lunch came the same way. Dinner too. I started to feel like a ghost haunting a palace, fed and cared for but unseen, untouched by life. Molly called me every day, sometimes twice. She was my only connection to the outside world. "Are you okay?" she always asked, her voice laced with worry. And I always lied. "I'm fine, everything's fine." She'd tell me about David, how he was settling into his new school, how he'd scored top marks in math again, how he missed me. That last part always broke me a little. "I'll see him soon," I'd whisper, trying to believe it. But when the calls ended, Silence swallowed me whole again. I wandered the house sometimes, just to move, just to prove to myself that I still existed in more than one room. It was massive, endless hallways lined with art I didn't understand, rooms furnished like magazine spreads, everything polished to perfection. But the perfection was cold. No laughter, no voices, no signs of life beyond the quiet footsteps of staff who barely met my eyes. At night, I lay in the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the security system and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed that last night with Miss Sinclair over and over. Her smile, her voice, the way she'd defended me to her brother. And then the news. Gone. Just like that. Sometimes I wondered if Mr. Colton grieved at all. Did he sit in some office somewhere, burying himself in work? Did he drink himself numb in that study where I'd last seen him? Or did he just shut it all away, like he seemed to shut everything away? The thought of him, of his cool, unreadable eyes, lingered far longer than I wanted it to. On the 18th day, I found myself standing by one of the massive windows in the living room, watching rain streak down the glass. The sky was grey, heavy with storm clouds, the kind of day that made you feel small. I pressed my palm against the cool pane and whispered to no one. I can't keep doing this. But the house gave no answer. I didn't know what time it was anymore. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed softly in the darkness, 2:14 a.m., but that didn't mean much to me these days. Sleep came in fragments now, in stolen pieces that left me more exhausted than rested. I'd drift off for an hour, wake up, doze again, wake again. 4 naps? 1? I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I lay there on my side, staring at the faint shadows cast by the soft moonlight slipping through the curtains, when I heard it, faint at first, almost imagined. Footsteps. My brow furrowed, and I pushed myself up, holding my breath. The sound came again, slow but steady, padding softly across the polished floors outside my room. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cool against floor, and crept toward the door. Pressing my ear to it, I listened. Yes, someone was definitely moving through the hallway. I hesitated, then slowly turned the knob and cracked the door open just enough to see. A tall figure moved past, half swallowed by shadows. Mr. Colton. He didn't see me. He was walking away, his shoulders tense beneath a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up haphazardly. His steps led down the corridor toward the far end of the house, where I knew his study was. The faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air, a clean, expensive blend I'd come to associate with him, but tonight it was muddled by something stronger. Whiskey. My chest tightened. I should have gone back to bed. I should have shut the door, crawled under the covers and minded my own business. But something in me wouldn't let me. Maybe it was the thought of him alone in that study, drinking himself into oblivion to escape the same grief that kept me awake. Before I could talk myself out of it, I eased the door shut behind me and followed. The hallway stretched long and silent, the soft glow of wall sconces guiding my steps. The scent of alcohol grew stronger with each one. When I reached the end of the corridor, I saw his study door cracked open, a sliver of warm light spilling into the hall. I lifted my hand and knocked, once, twice. "Come in," his voice called, low and rough. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. He was there, not behind his desk like I expected, but slouched on the leather couch, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. On the desk in front of him sat a framed photograph, him and Miss Sinclair. They were standing close together, smiling, her arm hooked around his like she was holding the world together for him. He wasn't smiling now. His hair was messy, strands falling loose over his forehead. Dark shadows bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and he looked hollow, like he hadn't really slept in days, like he was keeping himself alive out of sheer stubbornness. When his gaze lifted to me, there was no surprise there. just quiet acknowledgement. "What are you doing up this late?" he asked softly. His voice lacked its usual steel. I hesitated, suddenly self-conscious under his tired scrutiny. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. His brows drew together slightly. "Why?" "Because I sleep too much," I said with a faint, humorless laugh. "All day. I nap, I wake up, I nap again, and then at night I can't stay asleep. Tonight I woke up and I heard you." He didn't respond right away, just glanced down at his glass before setting it aside on the table. I took a small step closer, my hands twisting together. "How are you?" I asked softly. His eyes lifted to mine again, and for a moment something flickered there, pain, raw and unguarded, before he masked it with a slow exhale. His eyes stayed on me, unreadable. I swallowed hard and finally whispered, I'm sorry about your sister." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I liked her," I continued softly, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay steady. "She was a good person, with a beautiful heart." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint crackle of the electric fireplace. Then he lifted his glass and took a long swallow of whiskey, throat working as he drained what was left. He set the empty glass down on the table with a quiet clink, rose to his feet, and walked toward the desk. He picked up the framed photo, staring at it for a long beat. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost raw. "She was a good person with a good heart," he said. Then his tone hardened, a dangerous edge cutting through the softness. "But they decided to take her away from me." He flipped the picture face down with a sharp motion and turned toward me. My breath caught as he started walking in my direction, slow, deliberate steps. I instinctively backed up, my heart hammering faster with each pace he closed between us, until my back met the cool wall. He stopped just a breath away, his presence overwhelming, his gaze fixed on me. "Do you have any pain under your belly?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Any nausea?" Another small shake of my head. "Are you eating properly?" I nodded. "Taking everything they gave you?" Another nod. He stepped closer, closing the last bit of space between us, until I could feel the heat of him, smell the mix of whiskey and his cologne filling my lungs. My pulse fluttered wildly. Then, gently, he tilted my chin upward with his hand, forcing me to meet his eyes. They were tired, bloodshot, but piercing all the same. "Can you sleep with me tonight?" he asked, his voice low, almost a plea beneath the control. My breath hitched. "You're drunk, Mr. Colton," I whispered. Something flickered in his gaze. "Call me Colton." I let out a shaky laugh, trying to deflect. "I think you're drunk, Mr. Col—" I didn't finish. His mouth was on mine before I could speak another word. Firm, warm, tasting faintly of whiskey. He didn't move fast or roughly. He lingered, his lips pressing against mine with quiet insistence, like he was waiting, asking without words. My body went rigid for half a second, shocked. But then my chest loosened, breath shuddering out of me as I felt the unspoken desperation in him. I parted my lips. His hand slid to cradle my jaw, and he deepened the kiss, still unhurried but consuming, as if this moment was the only thing keeping him from unraveling completely. His lips lingered on mine, tasting faintly of whiskey and something entirely his own. Warm, steady, unrelenting. His hand cupped my jaw, thumb brushing lightly across my skin, as if he was memorizing me. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. He deepened the kiss slowly, like he was giving me every chance to stop him. I didn't. My fingers found his shirt, clutching the fabric over his chest. I felt the heat of him, the tremor in his breath when I let out a soft sigh against his mouth. "Ava," he whispered, rough and low, like my name scraped against something raw inside him. My knees weakened, and before I knew it, my back was no longer against the wall. He was guiding me toward the couch, his movements controlled but fueled by something he could no longer hold back. He sank onto it, pulling me with him, until I was straddling his lap. I felt the hard plane of his chest beneath my hands, the taut strength of his body under mine. He held my hips firmly, grounding me while his mouth traced a slow, deliberate path along my jaw, down to the curve of my neck. I shivered, my head tipping back involuntarily as his lips lingered there, not just kissing, but breathing me in. "You're trembling," he murmured against my skin. "I'm not." I started to deny it, but my voice caught, betraying me. His hand slid under the hem of my pajama shirt, fingertips grazing my skin. It sent a spark through me, not of fear, but of startling need, of finally feeling something other than grief and emptiness. Still, I hesitated, my breath hitching as I whispered, "Colton." He stilled at the sound of his name, his eyes meeting mine, searching, questioning. I didn't look away. I didn't have to say anything more. He kissed me again, harder this time, and the last of my restraint broke. Clothes loosened, fell away. His touch was sure but not rushed, each movement deliberate, like he was taking back pieces of himself with every second. I gave myself to moment, to him, because right now, in this room, with his grief pressing as heavily as mine, we were all the other had. When it was over, we didn't speak. We just sat there in the dim light, my head resting against his chest, his arm around me. For the first time since Miss Sinclair's death, he seemed still. His breathing slowed against my ear, deep and even, and within minutes he was asleep, like the weight of everything had finally dragged him under. I stayed awake, staring at the flicker of the fireplace, unable to quiet my own thoughts. How were we supposed to face each other in the morning? Would he even look at me? Would he regret this? Or worse, would he forget it happened at all? The questions looped endlessly in my mind as I lay there, trapped between his warmth and the cold uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, soft and golden, warming my face. I blinked awake, disoriented at first, until the scent of whiskey and cedar hit me. I wasn't in my bed. I sat up slowly, realizing I was curled on the couch in Colton's study, his shirt draped over me like a blanket. My heart skipped at the sight of it. Soft white cotton, still carrying his scent, his warmth. But then I noticed the empty room. He was gone. I swallowed hard, pulling the shirt tighter around myself as reality crept in. What had I done? Shoving the thought down, I got up quickly, grabbing my discarded pajamas and underwear from the floor and clutching them to my chest. My only goal was to get to my room without seeing anyone, without being seen. I cracked the study door open and peeked into the hallway. Empty. Good. I hurried down the corridor, barefoot, my hair a mess, Colton's shirt hanging far too loose on me. Each step felt like walking on a tightrope over a pit of mortification. If Margaret saw me like this, I slipped inside my room, relief flooding me, until I froze. Margaret was there. She stood near the window with her equipment case open, her posture as rigid and proper as always. She turned at the sound of the door, and her eyes fell on me, on the shirt I wore, on the clothes clutched in my arms. My cheeks burned. Heat climbed all the way to my scalp. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But Margaret's expression didn't change. No raised brows, no judging stare. Just the same calm professionalism she always wore. "Please have a seat," she said simply. I hesitated, but my legs moved on their own, carrying me to the edge of the bed. I sat down, eyes fixed on the floor. She approached, rolled up the hem of Colton's shirt without a word, and began her routine, checking my blood pressure, heart rate, asking the necessary medical questions in a neutral tone. Her hands were efficient, steady, giving nothing away. When she finished, she packed her equipment and turned to me. "Your breakfast is ready," she said. "Head down when you're done." That was it. No comments, no questions. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled shakily, like I'd been holding my breath the entire time. I tossed my clothes onto the bed and headed straight for the bathroom. The water came down hot, pounding against my skin as I pressed my palms to the tiled wall and let my head hang. Last night replayed in my mind like a film I couldn't stop. His hands, his voice, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only thing anchoring him. My heart thudded just remembering it, heat curling low in my stomach. It was my first time. I hadn't expected it, hadn't planned it, but it felt good. I closed my eyes, biting my lip. And then the shame hit. How was I supposed to face him now? How was I supposed to walk into this house, knowing the staff probably guessed? Margaret might not have said anything, but she didn't need to. Word would spread. It always did. I pressed my hands to my face, groaning. God, Ava, what were you thinking? I scolded myself silently, going over every reason why this was a terrible idea. He was my boss and my late employer's brother. He was responsible for me, and this was supposed to be professional. But even as I berated myself, the memory of his touch lingered, stubborn and undeniable. I liked it. I liked him. I let out a shaky breath, trying to calm the war inside me. I was a grown woman. I had every right to choose what I wanted. Still, one worry clawed through the noise louder than the rest. Please let this not affect the embryo. My hand drifted to my stomach, protective and anxious all at once. I stayed under the water longer than necessary, until my skin prickled from the heat, but no amount of showering could wash away the gnawing tension in my chest. Eventually I dried off, dressed in fresh clothes, and forced myself to head downstairs. The dining room was, as always, immaculate. Sunlight streaming through the high windows, the long table set with silverware polished to a shine. Breakfast waited for me under gleaming domes, fresh fruit, eggs, pastries, the usual spread that was far too much for one person. But still, he was not around. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed. I sat down and picked half-heartedly at the food. The silence in this house was oppressive, the kind that made you feel too loud, even when you weren't speaking. I hated it. Margaret appeared briefly to refill my water glass. "Will there be anything else, Miss Ava?" "No," I said quickly, keeping my eyes on my plate. She gave a small nod and left, the soft click of her shoes fading down the hall. I pushed the food around my plate, my appetite gone. Every second of silence felt heavier, pressing on me. Maybe this was for the best. Maybe he'd left early. Maybe I wouldn't have to see him, wouldn't have to wonder what last night meant or didn't mean. The sound of footsteps shattered the stillness. I looked up. Colton strode into the dining room, dressed in a dark suit, hair neatly combed, every trace of last night's dishevelled exhaustion erased. His face was unreadable until his eyes met mine. One glance, sharp, deliberate, piercing straight through me. And then he looked away, grabbed his coffee without a word, and walked past me. Out of the dining room. Out of the house. The front door closed behind him with a soft but final click, leaving me alone with the echo of that single look. I stared at my untouched breakfast, my chest tight. That glare. What did it mean? Was it anger? Regret? Or was I simply nothing more than a mistake to him now? I pushed my plate away and stood, pacing the length of the room. I hated how unsettled I felt, how much power he had over my mood with just one look. Margaret reappeared in the doorway. "Miss Ava?" I turned to her, startled. "Miss Ava," she said in her calm, clipped tone, "you should have your breakfast. You'll need to take your vitamins afterwards." I swallowed down the knot in my throat and nodded, sinking back into my chair. The food in front of me looked too perfect to touch, but I forced myself to eat what I could. Half a croissant, some fruit, a few sips of juice, just enough to appease her. When I was done, Margaret placed a small white cup of pills on the table and a glass of water beside it. I took them without a word. "Good," she said, giving a small nod. Call if you need anything." And then she was gone, leaving me alone again. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the gleaming silverware, the empty seat where he'd stood minutes ago, the hollow silence swallowing the room whole. Finally, I stood and went upstairs, moving almost on autopilot. In my room, I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled to Molly's name and hit call. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice bright and teasing. "Morning, rich lady." Despite myself, I chuckled weakly. "Don't start, Molly. I called you because I need you to help me understand something." "That sounds ominous," she said. "What's going on?" I hesitated, pacing the room. "Something happened last night. With Colton." There was a bit of silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "Wait, what happened?" I sank onto the edge of the bed, rubbing my forehead. We slept together, Molly." "You what?" she practically squealed. "Ava, are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious," I hissed, lowering my voice even though I was alone. "And this morning, he looked at me once and walked out, didn't say a word. I don't know what that means. I'm scared, Molly. What if he regrets it? What if it changes everything?" Molly's tone softened slightly. "Okay, slow down. Why are you scared? Did he force you?" "No," I said quickly, fiercely. "God, no, it wasn't like that. I wanted it. I wanted him." "Then why are you scared?" I opened my mouth, but no answer came. Why was I scared? Because I didn't understand him. Because I didn't understand myself. Because a part of me had wanted last night to mean something, and I wasn't sure it did. I stared at the floor, gripping the phone tighter, and couldn't find the words. "Then why are you scared?" Molly asked again, softer this time. I had no answer. The days passed in a slow, dull rhythm. Colton came home sometimes, other nights he didn't. When he did, I rarely saw him. We existed in the same house but on different planets. He spoke to me only when necessary, his words clipped and formal, as though what we had had been erased from existence. At first it hurt, a sharp, confusing ache that made me restless, made me wait for footsteps that never came, glances that never lingered. But eventually, I stopped expecting anything. I learned to live with the silence. I filled my days with books, short walks in the garden under Margaret's watchful eye, calls to Molly, and long hours staring out the window at a world I no longer belonged to. Weeks slipped by, each one blending into the next. But while Colton became more distant, my body reminded me daily that I wasn't entirely alone. The first trimester crept up on me quietly, bringing with it waves of exhaustion that felt bone deep. Some mornings I could barely drag myself out of bed. My mood swung wildly, tears over nothing, irritability over everything. My appetite was erratic. I craved odd things at odd times, then couldn't stomach the sight of food minutes later. Sometimes I found myself touching my stomach without thinking, fingers lingering there like I was checking to make sure the life inside me was still real. One late afternoon, as I stood in the closet room changing out of my loose loungewear, something caught my eye in the mirror. I turned slightly, lifting the soft cotton shirt over my head. And there it was, subtle, but unmistakable, the gentle curve of my stomach. Not just bloating, not just in my head. I froze, staring at the small swell. It hit me all at once. There really was a baby inside me. Not just a medical procedure, not just a responsibility. A tiny life growing. My throat tightened, and I reached down, resting a trembling hand over the bump. For a moment, the loneliness, the confusion, the silence of this house, all of it faded, replaced by a fragile, overwhelming sense of awe. And then, just as quickly, fear seeped in. Because I was carrying his sister's child in his house, under his name, and I had no idea where I stood with him, or what would happen when this baby arrived. But for now, this child growing inside me will be my buddy, to distract me from thinking too much, and from the loneliness that lingers in every corner of this house.
Colton's point of view.
My life wasn't always perfect. Hell, it was never normal. Not like those businessmen you read about in glossy magazines, smiling in tailored suits, posing with their perfect wives and perfect lives. Not like those billionaires who inherited empires and spent their days playing golf. No, I built everything I had by bleeding for it. I worked my ass off for years, days that bled into nights, nights that ended in boardrooms or back offices of my hotel and club. I made deals most men wouldn't dare touch. I fought for contracts, clawed my way into industries that didn't want me, and outmaneuvered men twice my age with twice my resources. And when I wasn't working, I was distracting myself. Expensive liquor, nameless women, empty nights that blurred together. None of it meant anything. It was just a way to forget that underneath all the success, all the power, I was still just a man with nothing real to go home to. Except my sister. She was the one good thing I had left. I'd check on her every day, no matter where I was in the world. She'd tease me about it, but I didn't care. She was my anchor, the reason I hadn't completely drowned in the mess of my own life. And then they killed her. Took her from me like she was nothing. And I found out who was involved. Nathan, the ex-boyfriend of the woman now carrying my sister's child, Ava. The same woman I promised to protect. The same woman I, God help me, ended up sleeping with. Or maybe ended up isn't the right phrase. I'd been drinking that night, drowning in whiskey and grief, and when I saw her standing there, small, lonely, looking at me like she understood pain, I wanted her. I wanted something to make me feel alive again, even for a moment. I told myself it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that I could lock it away like everything else I didn't want to feel. But it's not locked away, not really. Because now, every time I look at her, I remember the way she felt in my arms, the way she whispered my name, the way for one night I forgot what it was to be hollow. And I hate myself for it. Because she's not mine, she's my responsibility. The phone buzzing snapped me out of it. I snatched it up without looking at the caller ID. "Speak," I barked. "It's me." My private investigator's voice came through, tense. "I've got an update on Nathan." I gripped the phone tighter. "Go on." There was a pause, like he didn't want to say it. Nathan's father, Mayor Hayes, had him flown out of the country, no flight plan on record, no customs logs we can trace. He's gone. For now. A low, cold fury settled in my chest. "Where?" "That's just it. We don't know," he said reluctantly. "But we'll keep digging. Whatever it takes, we'll find him, Mr. Colton, I promise you that." I didn't reply. Because in that moment I realized just how far Nathan's reach went, how protected he was, how slippery this was going to get. I ended the call without a word. The rage that had been simmering in me all day finally boiled over. I hurled the phone across the room, watching as it slammed into the glass wall and shattered into pieces. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty room. I braced my hands on the edge of my desk, chest heaving, jaw locked so tight it ached. He was out there, protected, untouchable for now. And my sister was still dead. I dragged a hand over my face and let out a breath that felt more like a growl. I couldn't stop until I had him. I wouldn't stop. The silence in my office was interrupted by the sharp ring of the landline on my desk. I glanced at the fractured glass wall where my phone had shattered moments ago, jaw still tight, before crossing the room to pick it up. "Mr. Sinclair?" a male voice said, professional but edged with nervousness. "This is Dr. Lawrence from St. Matthew's Hospital. I was your sister's attending physician during her treatment." My stomach tensed. "Yes. We need you to come to the hospital immediately. There's something we need to discuss with you in person." "What is this about?" I demanded. There was a pause, too long. It's regarding the embryo transfer, he said finally, but it's best if we talk face to face. My pulse spiked with unease. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up without another word, grabbed my jacket, and stormed out of the office. The drive to St. Matthew's felt like it took hours, even though I pushed the car harder than I should have. When I arrived, the usual sterile calm of the hospital felt heavier somehow, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. I was escorted upstairs to Dr. Lawrence's office. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. There were 3 other doctors already there, seated stiffly around the desk, their faces pale and tense. Not one of them could meet my eyes. My gut clenched. What the hell is this about? Dr. Lawrence, a middle-aged man with graying temples, stood slowly. Mr. Sinclair, thank you for coming on such short notice. Get to the point, I snapped. What's going on? He exchanged a glance with the others before looking back at me. First, let me apologize. Apologize for what? I cut him off, my voice like ice. Dr. Lawrence swallowed hard. For a grave error in the embryo transfer procedure. Every muscle in my body went rigid. What do you mean, error? The doctor hesitated, then forced the words out. The embryo implanted in Miss Ava does not contain your sister's genetic material. The sperm we used, it does not belong to Miss Sinclair, it belongs to someone else entirely. For a moment I just stared at him, not comprehending. And then the meaning hit me like a freight train. You're telling me, I said slowly, dangerously, that the child Ava is carrying isn't my sister's. Dr. Lawrence's face crumpled with shame. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sinclair. There was a catastrophic clerical mix-up during the procedure. We only discovered it after a recent audit of the lab's records. We are conducting a full investigation to identify the biological parents of the embryo, but I slammed my hands on the desk, the sound cracking through the office like thunder. You let this happen, I snarled. You let my sister go through hell for nothing. You let her die believing this child would be hers, and now you're telling me you don't even know whose baby this is? The doctors flinched but said nothing. I could barely breathe. Rage and betrayal churned in my veins, but beneath it all was something I didn't want to name. Something that had to do with Ava. Because if this baby wasn't my sister's, then what the hell did that mean for her? For me? I leaned forward over the desk until I was almost nose to nose with Dr. Lawrence. My voice dropped, low and dangerous. Do you know, I said slowly, that my sister was the co-founder of this fertility department? The room went still. Dr. Lawrence's mouth opened, then shut. He couldn't look me in the eye. I slammed my palm on the desk so hard the pens and papers jumped. Answer me. No one spoke. How the fuck? I roared, smashing my hand down again. Did this happen under you so-called professional doctors? Still silence. I looked from one face to another, seeing nothing but pale, frightened stares. My fury only sharpened. I hope you'll find your voices, I said coldly, straightening, when I have each of you dragged in front of a judge, because I swear to God I will burn this department to the ground and you will all answer for this. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel, raking a hand through my hair as I stormed out of the office, my breath coming hard and uneven. The hallway blurred around me as I yanked at my tie, loosening it enough to breathe. My mind spun out of control. My sister's death, her final wish, all the promises I'd made to protect what she left behind, all of it, built on a lie. And Ava. Ava sitting in my house right now carrying a child that had nothing to do with my sister, nothing to do with me. I had brought her into my home, guarded her like she was carrying a piece of my family. I had put my life on hold for her. I had slept with her. And now I didn't know what the hell to do. I drove aimlessly through the city, engine growling beneath me, lights streaking by in a blur. My hands were locked on the wheel, my jaw clenched so hard it ached. I should have gone to the hotel, buried myself in contracts, clients, meaningless deals. Work always numbed me before. But tonight, no. I couldn't focus on a damn thing except the chaos tearing through my head. At the next light, I swore under my breath and wrenched the wheel hard, making a sharp U-turn back toward the estate. When I pulled into the drive, I killed the engine but didn't get out. I sat there for nearly half an hour staring at the darkened windows of the house that had begun to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. For both of us. I had no idea where to start with this mess. The hospital, the doctors, they were finished. I'd see to that. I'd destroy every last one of them for what they'd done to my sister's memory. But Ava, that was different. She was innocent. I had dragged her into this, given her this job, put her in this situation, and then taken advantage of her in my study. I'd crossed every line there was to cross. Now she was carrying a child that didn't even belong to my sister, a stranger's child, and I had no idea how to face her. I exhaled hard, shoving open the door. The night air was cool against my heated skin. I braced a hand against the roof of the car as a sudden wave of dizziness hit me, my vision swimming. I held there for a beat, forcing steady breaths until the spinning stopped. Then I straightened and headed inside. The house was quiet as always. My footsteps echoed on the marble as I made my way upstairs, each one heavier than the last. When I reached the top of the staircase, I stopped dead. Ava stood in the hallway outside her room, her thin pajama shirt clinging a little tight on her, both hands resting protectively over the small curve of her belly. Visible now, undeniable. She looked down at it with a soft, almost reverent expression, unaware I was there. Something inside me cracked at the sight. All the rage, all the grief, all the confusion that had been coiled tight inside me collided with something I didn't have a name for. I couldn't breathe. My sister's baby was gone. But hers, this child, this life was real right there in front of me. My fists curled at my sides, my pulse thundered in my ears. And now I fucking didn't know if I wanted to destroy everything, or protect what was left.
Ava's point of view.
I felt him before I saw him. That heavy electric pull in the air, like the room tightened just because he stepped into it. My fingers stilled where they rested over my stomach. Slowly, I lifted my head. Colton was standing at the top of the stairs, shadows cutting across the hard planes of his face. His eyes, God, those eyes, were locked on me, burning in a way that made my skin prickle. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The house was so quiet, I swore he could hear my heartbeat. "You're awake," I whispered, because I had to say something. His jaw ticked. Couldn't sleep. His voice was low, rough, like gravel under wheels. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. My hand drifted unconsciously over my belly, and his gaze followed the movement. Something flickered in his expression. Pain? Anger? I couldn't tell. "Colton?" I asked carefully. "What's wrong?" He took a step closer, then stopped, his fists curling at his sides like he was holding something back. His throat worked once before he spoke again. "Are you having any trouble with anything?" he asked, voice quieter now. "Do you need something? Anything at all?" I blinked, caught off guard. That wasn't the question I expected. "No," I said softly. "I'm fine." His eyes lingered on me, unreadable, like he was searching for cracks in my answer. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Good." And then, without another word, he brushed past me. I turned, watching his broad shoulders retreat down the hallway toward his room, the air still charged in his wake. He didn't look back. Something was bothering him. I could see it in every line of his body, hear it in the way his voice scraped like it hurt to speak. And, whatever it was, he wasn't ready to tell me. I stood frozen in the hallway, long after he disappeared into his room. The soft click of his door shutting echoed through me louder than it should have. He'd asked if I needed anything, if I were having trouble, like a man offering help while drowning himself. I pressed my hand over my stomach again, grounding myself in the tiny heartbeat I couldn't hear but knew was there. This baby was real, alive, the only thing tethering me to a future I couldn't even picture yet. But Colton... He was slipping further into the shadows every day. At first I thought it was grief. Of course it was grief. But tonight it felt like something else. His eyes had been heavy with secrets, and for the first time I was terrified those secrets weren't about his sister. I chewed the inside of my cheek, staring at his closed door. I wanted to knock, to push until he told me what was eating at him, but Colton wasn't the kind of man you could push. He let people in when he wanted to, and only as far as he allowed. With a quiet sigh, I slipped back into my room. The sheets were still warm, but sleep didn't come easily. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the hush of the house, the faint hum of the city beyond the estate walls. Colton had taken me in, given me a roof, food, and safety. More than that, he'd given me glimpses, just glimpses, of a man underneath the billionaire armour. A man who could be tender, protective. A man who, for one night, had looked at me like I was more than a deal, more than a mistake. And now he was shutting down again. I turned onto my side, hugging the pillow close. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the weight I saw in his eyes was only mine, reflected back at me. But deep down, I knew better. Colton Sinclair was hiding something. Morning sunlight spilled across the marble floors when I made my way downstairs, the faint clink of dishes and low murmur of staff voices guiding me toward the dining room. Normally, by the time I came down, the space was quiet, just me and the smell of fresh juice and fruits. But today, I froze at the doorway. Colton was already there. Seated at the head of the long oak table, dressed in a crisp shirt with the cuffs rolled up, his posture sharp but somehow relaxed. A steaming cup of coffee sat near his hand, a plate half empty in front of him. He looked up as though he'd been waiting for me, and when his eyes met mine, he smiled. "Good morning, Ava." His voice was warm, lighter than I'd ever heard it. I blinked, almost suspicious. "Morning," I managed, my throat catching around the word. Last night's shadowed man, tight-jawed, haunted, was gone. In his place sat someone almost approachable. The suddenness of the shift rattled me more than his silence ever had. I slid into a chair, trying not to stare, though my shock must have been written all over my face. A staff member immediately placed a plate in front of me, the aroma of eggs and toast rising up. My stomach, traitorous and hungry, growled softly. Colton leaned back in his chair, watching me with that faint, easy smile. "How are you finding things here?" he asked casually, as though we were two friends catching up instead of a billionaire and the woman carrying a child under his roof. I blinked again. Good. Quiet," I said, fumbling for words. He nodded, like he expected that. "And your brother? How's he doing in school?" I stared at him. Of all the things I thought he'd ask me over breakfast, that wasn't on the list. "He's adjusting," I said carefully. "It's different for him. New environment, new people. But he's smart. He'll be fine." "Would you like me to arrange a visit?" His tone was casual, but it hit me like a stone dropped in water. "You could go see him, or he could come here, whichever you prefer." My fork clattered softly against the plate. I looked at him, searching his face for the catch, because there was always a catch with Colton. But his expression was open, almost gentle. I swallowed. That would mean a lot to him. He nodded again, as if making a mental note. Then, almost too smoothly, he added, "And you've been inside these walls for weeks. Would you like to go somewhere? Anywhere you'd like. The city, the coast. You don't have to stay cooped up here all day." For a moment I just stared at him, utterly thrown. This was not the man from last night, not the man who had stormed past me weighed down by secrets he wouldn't share. This man looked like he'd woken up and decided to try on kindness, and I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Colton Sinclair didn't sit at the breakfast table like an ordinary man. He didn't smile lightly, as if the weight he carried every night simply evaporated by morning. He wasn't supposed to ask about my brother, or if I wanted to leave the estate. It was almost normal, and that, more than anything, unsettled me. I cut a piece of toast, stalling, before daring to ask, "Are you fine?" His eyes lifted to mine. For a heartbeat they softened, softer than I'd ever seen. Then he leaned back, one arm draped across the chair, the picture of effortless control. "I'm fine," he said simply, like it was the easiest truth in the world. But I knew better. Still, I didn't press. Some things about Colton felt like locked doors, and pushing them only made him bolt them tighter. So I let it go, even though every instinct screamed that last night's shadows hadn't disappeared. They'd only been tucked away, hidden under this polished version of him. Instead, I gave him a small smile. "That's good." His mouth curved just slightly. "Don't sound so surprised." I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. "You're usually gone by the time I'm down here, or brooding in your study. This is new." "Maybe I wanted to see what breakfast with you looks like," he said smoothly. Heat crept up my neck, and I quickly busied myself with my eggs. For a while, we ate in a strange, easy silence. Sunlight poured across the table, catching in the edges of his hair, softening him in a way I wasn't used to. It made him look almost boyish, if a boy could wear the weight of an empire on his shoulders. "As for your question," I said after a pause, setting my fork down, "on where I'd like to go, I'd like to spend some time with my friend." Colton didn't flinch. He simply lifted his coffee cup, took a slow sip, and then gave a single nod. "All right then, I'll drop you." I choked on my juice, coughing hard enough to make my eyes water. The glass nearly slipped from my hand, cold liquid spilling down my front. Colton's chair scraped against the floor as he pushed up slightly, his voice sharp with concern. "Ava, are you all right?" "I'm fine," I wheezed, grabbing a napkin to blot at the mess spreading across my shirt. Heat burned my cheeks as I tried to mop up the worst of it. "Just went down the wrong way." His eyes lingered on me a second longer, as if he didn't believe me, but then he straightened fully. "Be ready in 5 minutes." And with that, he turned and walked out, his broad shoulders cutting a clean line through the doorway. I sat frozen, staring after him, the echo of his words settling over me like a stone I wasn't sure how to carry. When I finally dragged my gaze back, the chef was pretending to busy himself at the counter, while the nurse stood near the wall, her lips pressed in a tight line. Neither said a word. I let out a slow breath, reaching for the small pill organizer at the edge of the table. I swallowed the morning dose with the last sip of water in my glass, then pushed back from the table. Upstairs, in the quiet of my room, I dressed quickly. Nothing too fancy, just jeans and a blouse that still fit comfortably. As I brushed my hair, my hand drifted toward my phone on the nightstand. I unlocked it, Molly's name right there at the top of my messages. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. "I'm coming over." But then I stopped. No, better to surprise her. A smile tugged at my lips at the thought. I've missed her. I can't wait to see her face when I show up at the door. The smile faded almost as quickly as it came. What was Colton really up to? He didn't just offer to drive me anywhere. He didn't just decide out of nowhere that I should go visit friends. No, Colton Sinclair always had a reason. and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever his reason was, I was walking straight into it. 5 minutes later, I was hurrying down the grand staircase, tugging on my jacket as I went. The sound of an engine idling floated through the open front doors, and my pulse quickened. His car waited at the bottom of the steps, polished to a mirror shine. The driver stood ready, but Colton leaned against the side of the car like he owned the whole damn road, hands in his pockets, dark sunglasses shielding his eyes, the morning sun glinting off his watch. When he saw me, he straightened, his gaze sweeping over me once, sharp and assessing. Then he opened the rear door himself. "After you." I slid inside, the leather cool against my skin. He followed, the door shutting with a soft thud that somehow felt final, like we were sealed off from the rest of the world. For a few moments, silence hung heavy between us, broken only by the hum of the engine as the car rolled forward. I glanced sideways, pretending not to notice the way his arm rested along the seat, casual, but close enough that the heat of him reached me. "You didn't have to do this," I said quietly. His head turned slightly toward me. "Do what? Take me to Molly's. Drive me yourself. You could have sent someone." "I wanted to," he said simply, no hesitation. The directness of it sent my stomach fluttering. I turned to look out the window, hiding the flush creeping up my neck. A beat passed before his voice came again, lower this time. "You've been locked up in that house for too long. I thought maybe you needed this." I bit down on my lip. He wasn't wrong, but coming from him, Colton Sinclair, who rarely offered explanations for anything, it felt strange, almost intimate. I risked a glance at him. His sunglasses reflected the city blurring past, but I could feel his attention on me, even if I couldn't see his eyes. "What about you?" I asked before I could stop myself. "What about me?" His tone was cautious, like he already knew where I was going. "You don't strike me as the type who spends his mornings chauffeuring people around," I said softly. "So why are you really doing this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached forward, adjusting the cuff of his shirt with careful precision, as though the small movement could distract from the weight of the silence stretching between us. Finally, his voice came, steady and unreadable. Maybe I just needed the drive. I let out a small breath, not sure if he was deflecting or confessing. With Colton, it was always a coin toss. The rest of the ride was quiet, but it wasn't empty. The air between us felt charged, like something unsaid hovered there, waiting to break free. And as Molly's neighbourhood came into view, I realised that whatever I'd been expecting from this morning, sitting in a car beside Colton Sinclair, wondering what storm brewed behind his calm exterior, wasn't it. The car slowed to a stop in front of Molly's townhouse. My heart beat faster the closer we got, like it already knew this was about to feel more real than anything that had happened in weeks. Colton glanced at the house, then at me. "You have all day. I'll pick you up at 7. Before I could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a black credit card, holding it between 2 fingers. "Here, have some fun with your friend." My eyes widened. "Colton, that's not needed." "I insist." His voice was calm, steady, like this wasn't a conversation, just a decision already made. He stretched his hand toward me, palm up, waiting. For a moment I hesitated, staring at the card like it weighed more than gold. It felt dangerous, like taking it meant more than he was saying out loud. But his gaze didn't waver. Finally, I sighed, reaching out. My fingers brushed against his as I took it, the faintest spark zipping through me at the contact. I tucked the card quickly into my bag, trying not to think too hard about what it meant. "Thank you," I muttered, pushing open the car door. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, smoothing my blouse as I turned toward Molly's door. I could feel him even without looking, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced back. There he was, still sitting in the car, sunglasses on, watching me. I huffed under my breath, grumbling, "Why is he not leaving?" Shaking my head, I turned back to Molly's house and knocked 3 times, firm but nervous. The seconds dragged, stretching long enough that a knot of worry twisted in my chest. What if she's not home? What if I came all this way for nothing? Just as I raised my hand to knock again, the door creaked open. Molly stood there in an oversized t-shirt, hair a messy halo around her sleepy face. She rubbed at her eyes and mumbled, "How may I help you?" The words died in her throat as her gaze landed on me. My own breath caught. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, both frozen in shock. Then, at the exact same time, we screamed. "Ava? Molly?" We practically collided in the doorway, arms wrapping tight around each other, bouncing and laughing like two kids who hadn't seen each other in years instead of weeks. Tears stung my eyes as I squeezed her, my chest aching with relief and joy. "You're here. You're actually here," Molly said, her voice breaking with excitement as she pulled back just enough to stare at me again. "I missed you so much," I blurted, hugging her again before she could say another word. "Come inside." She tugged me by the hand, pulling me into the warm, familiar chaos of her living room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like me again. Molly all but dragged me to the couch, shoving aside a pile of throw blankets so I could sit. She perched next to me, her eyes scanning me up and down with the kind of curiosity only she could get away with. "How are you even here?" she asked, wide-eyed. "I remember you telling me you weren't supposed to leave the house except for the doctor's appointments." Before I could answer, her gaze dropped to my belly. Her mouth fell open, and then she broke into the biggest grin. "Oh my God, look at you. Your belly's grown so much. How do you feel about it?" I groaned, leaning back into the cushions. "Molly, chill." "Girl, don't tell me to chill," she shot back, smacking my knee playfully. "I'm so excited to see you. I thought I wouldn't get to until like a year from now." 9 months, not a year, I corrected, rolling my eyes but smiling despite myself. "Whichever it is," she waved a hand. "Now spill, how are you here?" I hesitated, chewing my bottom lip before answering. "Something is wrong. Colton, this morning I don't know. He was different. He asked me about my life, my brother, whether I'd like to get out of the house. And then he just decided I should come see you." Molly blinked at me like I'd just confessed the sky was green. "Okay. And what is so wrong about that?" "It's weird, Molly." I threw my hands up. "Ever since I came to his house, I've been indoors, given strict instructions, monitored, fed, taken care of, but never this. He woke up this morning like a completely different person, even after My voice dropped. "You know, did it in his study. He never acted like that." Molly's eyebrows shot up so high I thought they'd disappear into her hairline. "Excuse me? You're going to gloss over that part like you didn't just casually say it?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "Molly," she smirked, leaning back and folding her arms. "Uh-huh. Well, maybe he just cares about your mental well-being. I mean, come on, Ava, you're carrying his dead sister's child. That's a lot. And as for you, you know..." She wiggled her brows dramatically. "Fucking him. He probably doesn't even remember. He was drunk, wasn't he?" I buried my face in my hands, groaning. "Why are you like this?" "Because somebody has to say it out loud," she laughed, nudging me with her shoulder. "And it's always going to be me." Molly grinned like a cat who'd just found a saucer of cream. "And don't you dare try to change the subject, Ava. Back it up. The study? The big, broody billionaire's office?" I groaned, dragging a pillow over my face. "Please stop." "Oh, I am never stopping," she said gleefully, tugging the pillow off me. "So what happened, huh? Did he push all his important papers aside and..." "Molly!" I smacked her arm, but she only laughed harder. "Oh my God, you so did. That explains why he's acting weird this morning. You rocked his world, girl." My cheeks burned so hot I thought they might combust. "He was drunk," I hissed. It didn't mean anything." Molly arched a brow. "Mm-hmm. Keep telling yourself that, but let me guess. You weren't drunk." I froze, my lips parting, and she caught it immediately. Her jaw dropped. "You weren't," she gasped. grabbing my arm like I'd just admitted to committing a crime. "You were stone cold sober and you let him—" She cut herself off, then burst into laughter so loud I worried the neighbours would hear. I buried my face in my hands again. "I hate you." "No, you love me," she said between fits of giggles. "And you love that man too, you just won't admit it." My head snapped up. "I do not love him." She tilted her head, smirking knowingly. "Maybe not, but you feel something, don't you? Otherwise you wouldn't look so wrecked right now." I opened my mouth, then closed it, unable to form a response. Molly's smile softened. She nudged my shoulder gently. "Ava, I know it's complicated. He's complicated. But maybe this morning wasn't weird. Maybe it was him. Trying." I chewed my lip, staring at my hands. But why now? Why act like a different man overnight? Why be cold one moment and kind the next? "Because," Molly said simply, "men like him don't know how to handle their feelings. So they go hot, then cold, then back again. Doesn't mean he doesn't care. It just means he's a mess." Her words sank deep, stirring emotions I wasn't ready to name. Molly reached across the couch when I pulled the little black card from my pocket. I'd meant to just show her, but of course she snatched it straight out of my hand. Her eyes went wide, almost reverent. "Well, damn, riches really do live a different life. This could buy me a mansion, and the rest of my life's happiness." I rolled my eyes. "You don't even know how much is on it." "For cards like these," she said seriously, holding it up to the light like it was made of diamonds, "and to a man like Colton Sinclair, this is fortune." I snatched it back, sliding it into my pocket. "Anyway, I'm not using it." "Excuse me?" Molly dove after me, managing to pull it free again. She wiggled it between her fingers with a mischievous grin. "Why not? He gave it to you to use, so we're using it. Some shopping, and for the baby inside you." I stilled. My gaze dropped to my stomach, the gentle swell under my loose blouse. The reminder sliced through me like glass. "That's not my responsibility, Molly. I don't want to get attached to a child I won't even get to see." Her smile faltered. She studied me for a moment, then nodded softly. "Okay, we won't use it." The card slipped onto the table with a quiet click. Molly pushed to her feet with a stretch. "Well, before we leave the house, what would you want? As you can see, you just woke me from—" "I had breakfast already, Molly," I interrupted quickly. "Don't stress yourself." She smirked, tossing her hair. All right, I'll go clean up then." I leaned back against the couch, watching her disappear down the hall, then called out, "Molly?" Her head popped back around the corner. "Yeah?" "How's David?" My voice was small, almost shaky. Like, how does he look? How is he doing? Molly's face softened instantly. "Would you want to see him?" My hand flew to my belly. I shook my head too quickly. Not in this state. I gestured to the curve of me, the visible proof of everything I was tangled up in. "I'm not ready for questions." Molly stepped out fully, her expression gentle now. "I understand. But he's fine, Ava. Better than fine. Mr. Colton got him into this really good school, one that only rich kids and heirs go to. Trust me, David is loving it there." My lips curved into a small smile, but it was weak, forced. I blinked quickly, masking the tears stinging behind my eyes. God, I missed him. So much it ached. We walked out into the city like two people who owned nothing but the time they had with each other. The air was sharp and bright, the kind that made everything look newer. Storefronts gleamed, pigeons argued over crumbs, and people hurried past with the anonymity of strangers. Molly linked her arm through mine and steered me toward the nearest cafe, already chattering a mile a minute about which places we had to hit. "First coffee, then we attack the shops," she declared, like we were planning a heist rather than a day of harmless indulgence. Inside the cafe, the steam from the espresso machine fogged the windows. We found a small table by the glass. Molly ordered 2 cappuccinos and a slice of lemon cake because she had always believed sugar fixed most things. We talked in the easy rhythm of old friends' little updates, big laughs, the kind of conversation that didn't need to be edited. She told me about work nonsense, the neighbour's ridiculous dog, the latest gossip, while I tried to answer and found myself drifting, watching her mouth move and feeling the ache of months of absence dissolve a little with each laugh. When the cake arrived, I let her have the first bite, insisting, which only made her louder with appreciation. The coffee tasted like home in a way I hadn't expected, bitter and honest. Outside, the city performed its busy show, but inside that small cafe, it was only us and the soft clink of cutlery. We moved on to boutiques that smelled of linen and who knows what perfume millionaires bought. Molly pulled out dresses and shoved them at me with the delighted possessiveness of someone finally making up for lost time. "Try this," she said, and I let her boss me into a dressing room, the soft curtain closing around us like a private world. I stood in front of the mirror awkwardly, a borrowed dress clinging in unfamiliar ways around my bump. I smoothed it down with both hands, surprised at how that simple motion calmed me. Molly peeked in and gave a pained sigh, which I knew meant she loved it and also wanted it for herself. "You look like someone who belongs on a postcard," she declared. "Postcards are cheesy," I muttered, but my mouth lifted despite myself. We took ridiculous selfies, laughed at my poses, and let a salesperson tell us that I glowed in tones that made Molly jump in to correct him. The world had returned to small humiliations and silly victories, and it was intoxicating. By mid-afternoon we drifted toward the quieter side of the shopping street, where smaller shops clustered a bookshop with a bell that sang when the door opened, a tiny florist, and then the one that made my steps slow without my permission, a baby boutique. It sat between a bakery and a tailor, its window dressed in soft pastels and tiny hangers holding impossibly small clothes. A knitted blanket draped like a secret across the display, and mobile animals swayed slowly as if asleep. Molly saw the hesitation in my face and squeezed my hand. "Come on," she whispered. "Let's take a look, just to see." Inside, the air smelled of cotton and something faintly powdery. Everything was miniature and perfect. Tiny socks folded like mittens, onesies printed with little boats and smiling moons, soft plush toys whose eyes seemed stitched with patient wisdom. I drifted from shelf to shelf like someone walking through an old photograph, each item tugging at a place in me I had kept carefully wrapped. A pale blue hat caught my hand first. It was the size of a walnut, and the yarn was so soft it almost dissolved under my fingers. I held it up and felt ridiculous for being moved. The hat was not mine. It belonged to someone else, a plan arranged, a biological fact in someone else's life. I put it down, picked up a tiny pair of shoes, let them dangle from my thumb. They were perfect, with little laces so fine you could hardly see them. Molly didn't push. She watched me with that steady, unflinching look she had perfected over the years, the one that meant she would give me space to decide, but would buy me the world if I let her. "They have the softest blankets here," she murmured, tipping her head like she was asking permission to indulge. I moved to the racks and ran my hand over a quilt stitched with stars. The fabric was warm and faintly scented with the shop's detergent, and for a second I pictured it wrapped around a small body. The world narrowed to nothing but a shape that breathed. The thought punched the air from my lungs. "Don't," I told myself, quiet and fierce. This child was not mine. I would give it warmth and care for a time, and then probably never see that face again. Attachment felt like a slow, deliberate risk. I had no right to take that chance. Molly intercepted a basket and dropped a plush rabbit into it before I could protest. "We'll get a little something," she said. "A tiny token." She smiled at me like she'd already decided the matter. "For you to keep, or for the baby, whatever you want." I bit my lip and let the protest die. There were reasons to refuse. There were reasons to protect my heart. But when she handed me the rabbit, its expression neutral and comically solemn, something soft in me unclenched. Maybe it was the way Molly's eyes crinkled when she smiled, like sunlight finding a cracked sidewalk. Or maybe it was the ache in the space where longing had lived for months. We paid, and Molly insisted on bagging the purchases in tissue paper as if we were preparing a present for someone very important. Outside, she stopped to buy a cone of gelato and handed me the first lick, which was messy and cold and perfect. She hummed a tuneless song, and I found myself humming back, the sound of it unfamiliar and yet so right. The afternoon moved like that, a collection of small, exquisite moments. We wandered through a market where a man pressed citrus into a glass and handed it to us as though it were a rare medal. We sat on a low wall and watched children chase each other with reckless joy. Molly pushed me into a tiny bookstore's poetry section, where I leafed through dog-eared lines and read verses aloud that felt like they were meant to be private. We talked about nothing and everything, and in each pause there was an ease I had forgotten existed. At one point, while I was trying on a scarf in a mirror that made my reflection look softer, Molly leaned in and said, "Gentle now. You okay?" I touched the place at my center, where the rabbit's fur pressed against my palm. "I am," I lied, then corrected myself. "I'm better." She nodded like she understood more than my words could say, and slipped her hand into mine. We didn't need to name the quiet fear that hummed under everything, the fear that buying a tiny sweater could make the final goodbye impossible. We only needed to be together. Before the light began to tilt toward evening, Molly steered me toward a small diner she loved. We ate overpriced fries and shared a burger, and she told me she'd take care of the rest my hair, perhaps a mani if I felt daring. We walked slowly back to her place, the new rabbit hidden under her coat like contraband. When we sat on her stoop, shoulders brushing, I felt something like peace settle over me. The city was a blur of life around us, but for once I was not only surviving, I was remembering how to be alive in small, ordinary ways, tasting too sweet dessert, laughing until my sides hurt, holding a trivial thing and feeling inexplicably held in return. Molly nudged me and pushed the tissue-wrapped rabbit into my bag before I could protest. "You're not alone in this," she said, half joking, half solemn. "And if you change your mind about that scarf, I will personally return it in the night with a clean conscience." I laughed, and it came out honest and startling. I unzipped my bag to make sure the card Colton had given me was still there, tucked safe into the pocket, a small, cold reminder of how complicated generosity could be. As the sun started to fall, painting the buildings in a softer gold, I rested my hand on my belly without thinking. The rabbit nudged my thigh through the bag, a tiny warmth against my jeans. For a moment I let myself imagine the future, the way Molly did, messy, imperfect, and still possible. I didn't let the image sit long. I tucked it away like a pressed flower. When I finally checked the time, my phone said it was nearing 6:30. Colton would be picking me up at 7, he had said. The thought made the small contentment in my chest tremble, but I didn't unmake the afternoon. I held on to the way Molly's laughter had sounded, the way the hat had felt between my fingers, the ridiculous stubborn comfort of a plush rabbit on the inside of my bag. Outside, the streets flared with evening lights. I breathed in the city and let myself accept, just for today, that I had been somewhere softer than home. By the time we reached Molly's place, the day had thinned into twilight, the street lamps beginning to hum their low, steady glow. The building was familiar, the kind that carried the warmth of old brick and worn steps, a place that had always smelled faintly of coffee and fresh laundry. But what I noticed first wasn't the chipped railing or the geraniums hanging from her neighbour's balcony. It was Colton's car. Sitting right there, sleek and silent at the curb, like it had been waiting all along. Molly spotted it too, and her lips curled into a mischievous grin. She elbowed me lightly in the ribs. "Well, well," she whispered, voice pitched with faux scandal. "Look who's here, staking his claim." I rolled my eyes, trying not to let the heat crawl up my neck. "Stop," I muttered. She poked me again, playful this time, her brows dancing. I didn't know the man could sit still that long without his world falling apart. Must mean something. "Molly." Okay," she sang, holding up both hands, a laugh bubbling out of her. "Just joking." We stood there a moment, lingering in the kind of pause you don't want to end. Finally, we both started laughing again, the sound soft but stubborn, like neither of us wanted to say goodbye just yet. "Come on," she said, looping her arm around my shoulders and steering me forward. Colton didn't get out. He stayed behind the wheel, a shadowy figure framed by the glow of the dashboard, his gaze steady through the glass. I pretended not to feel it, even though every step toward that car made my chest tighten. At the curb, I turned to Molly and folded her into my arms. The hug was long, desperate in a way neither of us spoke aloud. She smelled like her perfume, and I wanted to bottle it up to keep with me. "Don't disappear again," she whispered against my hair. "I won't," I said, though my voice cracked a little. "I'll find a way back." She pulled back, eyes glassy, but her smile unshaken. I forced myself to let go first. Sliding into the car, I shut the door softly, like the sound might shatter me if I wasn't careful. Colton shifted the car into gear and pulled away from the curb. I glanced back through the side mirror instinctively. There she was. Molly was still standing at the edge of the sidewalk, her arms folded tightly across her chest, watching me go. Not moving. Just a silhouette framed in streetlight, too far already and somehow too close. My heart clenched, sudden and sharp. We'd spent the whole day together, coffee, laughter, the baby shop, ice cream dripping down our wrists, everything. Yet here I was, aching for her already, missing her like she'd been torn away all over again. I pressed my palm against the bag on my lap, felt the soft lump of the rabbit through the fabric, and swallowed hard. Gratitude threaded through the ache, faint but undeniable. At least I had gotten this day this sliver of freedom, this reminder that life still existed beyond the stone walls of the mansion. Silence filled the car, heavy and thick. Colton didn't speak, and neither did I. The city lights streaked by in the windows, gold and white, flickering against the glass like fleeting stars. I stared out, my reflection faintly overlaying the blur of traffic and glowing signs. The quiet wasn't hostile. It was the kind that left room for thoughts you didn't want to admit, the kind that weighed on your chest because it left you alone with yourself. I tilted my head against the seat, watching the road unwind before us. Colton's hands on the wheel were steady, his profile carved sharp in the dim glow. And I let the silence have me. Because some aches had no words. Some goodbyes were too raw to soften, and some memories like Molly's hand squeezing mine in the baby store, or the way her laughter rose above the noise of the cafe weren't meant to be spoken, only carried. So I carried them, quietly, as the car drove on. But then his voice came. Deep, steady, and low, it sliced through the quiet and through me, lodging in a place I couldn't quite name. "Did you have a good time?" I turned, startled. His eyes stayed on the road, but something in the curve of his mouth, in the careful way he asked, made my heart twist. I nodded slowly. I did. The words felt too simple, too small for what the day had given me, for what he had given me. My lips parted, ready to thank him, to tell him that I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to breathe outside those walls until today. But before the words could leave me, a sharp cramp seized my belly. It wasn't mild. It was sudden, biting, like a knife twisting low and deep inside, the kind of pain that made me flinch so hard my breath hitched. My hand flew instinctively to my stomach, pressing, as though I could shield the life within from whatever this was. "Ava?" His voice sharpened instantly, no longer calm, no longer casual. But I couldn't answer him, not yet, because another wave of pain was already rolling through me.
I've been strong for too long, smiling through the cracks in me. Told the world I'm fine, but no one ever stays to see. I'm drowning in quiet, screaming when no one can hear. be there, my dear. I've carried love like a burden, given more than I had to give. But every kiss I gave away taught me how you're the one I